will join both conditions, the presidency of the Council and the presidency of the Commission. We must have a single clear voice in the world. We must go through a common defense policy that eventually should lead us to a common armed force, and so on. So in a few words, just to conclude, we must change the views of something that we call Europe, something that we see as an entity that imposes rules on us, and see it as what it is or it should be, which is our own and common house to keep the economic strength, but to support as well all the social achievements that we got during these years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Minister.
Sorry, thank you indeed for all the contributions. And again, we'll go through the individual speakers quickly. In terms of, to respond firstly to our Icelandic colleague, obviously the Icelandic government will set the pace that it wants. All EU candidates have the right to pursue negotiations at a pace that they deem appropriate, and we respect the decision of the Icelandic government, who have throughout the process from the beginning acted with the utmost transparency in all their dealings with member states and with both Commission and Council. In terms of the specific issue on fisheries, I think we have enough battles, certainly within my own purview, and I won't engage myself in a view, other than to say and to acknowledge that we have to recognise that all coastal states have legitimate rights, and these things are best dealt with in an open discussion and hopefully by consensus. I want, just before I respond to the specific point made by my Cypriot colleague, to acknowledge and commend Cyprus for the excellent presidency that it hosted that made the transition to the Irish presidency so easy. You make very strong and compelling points about north-south fairness, about the need to advance the banking union and the single support mechanism that is required. I think most of all you make the point that certainly has very strong resonance with the Irish presidency and with the Irish people, that we need to bring into concrete reality the Council declaration of last year, that we need to break the vicious circle between banking debt and sovereign debt. The Polish colleague, in relation to youth unemployment, again a theme that virtually every speaker has picked up. I hear what is said, and that is why it is such a priority for us. You mentioned the Europe 2020 strategy and how we can have an evaluation process for that. Well, the European semester obviously does have the annual growth survey. Maybe we need other instruments. Well, let's look at that if you have ideas. Our Luxembourg colleague talked about the long list of priorities that the Irish presidency has set itself, and that's true, and rightly points out that much of the work of the Union will depend on the results of the MFF, which has to set a sustainable path of funding for all the instruments that we've set out in a speedy process. I've said already that this will be primarily a matter for President Van Rompuy, but as our German colleague previously said, everybody must bring something to the table, and I hope that we can have a conclusion at the next Council meeting. I want to just make one mention in relation to the point he made about youth unemployment. I think that it's important to say that unless we tackle the basis of youth unemployment and give hope to people, we are eroding the democratic basis for the future of our Union. And I think that's something that would be completely unacceptable. I welcome the progress report from our Croatian colleague, and I'm very confident and look forward to Croatia joining the Union formally. Unfortunately, not during the Irish presidency, but probably on the day after. We'd like a day of welcome for Croatia as well. I've had discussions with the Croatian Vice President, myself, or Vice Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister myself, in that regard. And I welcome the fact that Croatia sees itself as a helper for other accession applicants to find the path to membership. And finally, I think the very profound contribution of our Spanish colleague in relation to his vision as set out of political union, which is ambitious, with common defence policies, the common army, and so on. I think we need to engage in debate, because obviously there are various visions. What is important is that we set out a role that brings the people with us incrementally, and that is having mechanisms for communication that ensures that there is not perceived to be some sort of European elite that's moving ahead of the people. We need to debate with people, get the consent of people, and march towards the ambition set out in the founding treaties of the Union. So, Chairman, thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts, to express hopefully some of the ambitious programme that we want to advance in the next 6 months during the Irish presidency. Obviously, the European Parliament and the Member States' Parliament have a critical role to play, and I wish you every success in your deliberations here and in the important work that you will advance, not only for the next 6 months, but for the many years of parliamentary activity that we look forward to ahead. Thank you very much indeed.
Minister, on behalf of the COSAC chairs, can I thank you for coming along this morning and for giving us such a stimulating presentation and for answering our questions so thoroughly. Now, we do have a coffee break outside, but there's just a couple of things to say in advance of that. Firstly, if anybody is trying to access the Wi-Fi network, I'm told that currently it's down, but we're expecting it to be fixed very shortly, so bide with us on that one. The second thing is in relation to the family photo. We're going to take a family photo now outside, so if you'd follow the staff, they'll show you where to go in the lobby. And we're back here at 11:30. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, can you take your seats, please, so that we can get the next session underway? So if you could find your seats, then we can kickstart. Our next speaker has arrived and is ready to go. So we're just waiting on the last of the people in the room to take their seats. Okay. Okay, can I remind you to take your seats, please, and we'll get started. Okay. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the next point on our agenda this morning is a discussion on the future of Europe towards a genuine economic and monetary union. And I'm delighted to welcome to the podium Mr. Maris Šefčovič, who's the Commission's Vice President with responsibility for interinstitutional relationships and administration. And Maris has kindly accepted our invitation to address our meeting on this subject and take part in the following debate. Vice President, the floor is yours.
Ministers, honourable members, parliamentarians, dear friends. At first, I really would like to thank you very much for the traditionally fantastic Irish hospitality, but also for hosting us in this prestigious castle, which really bears the weight of Irish and European history. And I would never forget that it was in Dublin when the new member states been officially welcomed to the European family. And for me, that moment when the flags of the new member states been risen is one of the most cherished from my diplomatic career. As I've said many times since the Ireland started its presidency, I was very clear that I have very high hope for your presidency, because your presidency has a lot of experience. Your presidency has very clear dedication to achieve concrete results, and you are doing it already for the 7th time. 7 should be a lucky number, so I believe that your presidency will be very successful. But to do that, we need exactly what we have seen this morning. Strong commitment from national, from European parliamentarians, because this is our joint venture, this is our common endeavour, and we have to work very hard together. Today, we have no less a topic than the future of the economic and monetary union, as well as the democratic challenge that will inevitably have to be addressed in parallel. And I'm absolutely sure that we'll see tangible results under the Irish presidency, but we also have to be very honest and to say it very clearly, that there is no quick fix to the current crisis, which we are struggling with over the last 5 years. We have seen serious challenges which have been faced by the governments, by the European institutions, but inevitably by our businesses and especially by our citizens. And I think that Minister Howling was describing it in very plastic colours. When the EMU was developed, the Economic and Monetary Union, there was also an agreement on certain common economic policies. There was an agreement on rules, and there was an agreement that we all are going to follow them. Now we know that this was not always the case. Many of the rules have been ignored, many of the rules have been bent, and instead of focusing on keeping our public finances under control, in many parts of Europe, large debt has been accumulated, structural reforms have been postponed, and the result was that we lost a lot of our competitiveness. The European Commission proposed to correct this development by introducing strategy EU 2020. We wanted to help set up the framework in which we can create real economic growth and jobs. But the problem was, and we realized it very quickly, that the Europe 2020 very much depends on one main prerequisite, and this is well-functioning EMU. How we are doing in economic monetary union, in what condition our common currency is, and how we are struggling with our macroeconomic stability. And it was quite clear that we need serious overhaul of economic governance of the EMU, which would much better reflect the interdependence of which we've been reminded so vividly over the last couple of years, that what economic development in one country, in one part of Europe, could do to the state of European economy as a whole. And this is what we did. We brought in the new measures, such as six-pack or two-pack, through which we want to economically govern ourselves better. We introduced the European Stability Mechanism, which is now the biggest financial firewall in the world. And we managed to start successful process of introducing the single supervisory mechanism for the banks. And let's be honest, these measures I just mentioned would be unthinkable just 1, 2, or 3 years ago. And this clear demonstration how far we already went and how important decisions we've been able to take on. But it's quite clear that we cannot stop there, but we need to consolidate the foundations for stronger, deeper, and more effective economic and monetary union. We must make sure that Europe will not see the crisis of this magnitude again. And I think that now, as it was said by several speakers in the morning panel, we need to shift our attention and to move from the crisis management mode to the proactive mode, to our procreative mode, where the result will be not only better equipped institutions, but especially better equipped policies for what is the priority for our citizens, and this is restoration of confidence, restoration of growth and jobs. I think that now, for the first time after many long months, we can see that the financial markets calm down, that we are starting to the process of restoration of the confidence. And we must make absolutely sure that we would need to continue in this restoration of trust, not only in the well-functioning single market, which is the core for creating new economic growth and jobs, but also the trust in euro itself, trust in our economy, and trust in our ability to adopt very important decisions on the national and the European level. And for that, we need also improve the trust in the legitimacy of the European Union action. If you look through any Eurobarometer surveys over the last couple of years, you would see that the trust of citizens in European Union, in European and national governing structures declined significantly. In 2012, we have seen some slight pickup, but 33% is hardly a ringing endorsement of our policies and of our actions. And therefore, we have to tackle this big layer of distrust in how we cooperate, how we do the business in the European Union. We need to reverse this trend and go back to the basics and deal with the fundamental issues which are facing Europe citizens, businesses and governments. And for that we need to act collectively, and we need to look for long-lasting solutions to the crisis and address what is the main concerns of the Eurobarometer surveys and of our, which was so expressly highlighted in the latest surveys. You will not be surprised that what's on the mind of our citizens as a number one priority and concern is unemployment. Then it's overall economic situation. Then the rising prices, government debt, health and social security, and many other problems. And therefore, to overcome these worries, to overcome the lack of trust, we have to offer to our citizens clear vision and the path of what needs to be done to ensure deeper EMU and better functioning European Union. And of course, all of this needs to be supported by clear commitment from both EU and national institutions. That was the main reason why the Commission proposed and put on the table its blueprint for deeper EMU last November. The aim of the blueprint was to marry the ambitious proposals with realistic timetable. And at the same time, we wanted to assess what means would be necessary to achieve the goals, and in particular, what can we do under the current framework and for what we would need a treaty change. And we've been very pleased to see that also European Council in December has taken many of these elements from the blueprint into the report of 4 presidents, which was presented by the Herman Van Rompuy to the European leaders. And the focus was mostly on what we have seen in the Commission as the short-term, immediate priorities, which can be done without any changes to the treaties. And this would be ex-ante coordination of major national reforms, introduction of contractual arrangements between member states and the EU institutions, build-up of solidarity mechanisms at the EU level to support the implementation of the reforms, and several other measures which should help us to go further and to deepen the quality of the economic and monetary union. To progress, we made it also very clear that we need to move at 27, and I believe very soon in 28. We need all member states on the board. At the same time, it's quite clear that not all of us want to move at the same pace. Not all of us are the members of the Eurozone. And therefore, it's quite important that we need to allow these countries in the Eurozone to progress faster and to work on deeper EMU integration. Because the high degree of integration, high degree of cooperation, high degree of trust is necessary if we want that our common currency would strive and work much better in the future than it was in the past. The blueprint presented the roadmap of actions. What can we do now? For what we need to look at the treaties and could be achieved in the short term, and also what should be the final stage. This look beyond the horizon, what should be the last final stage of the EMU. And of course, in all this process, what's absolutely key to the success would be that you, representative of the people, would be very closely involved with all this process, and that we can discuss how we can ensure and improve greater democratic legitimacy and accountability throughout the whole process. And as I have seen already in this morning, I think that this healthy debate has already started, and I think that we'll have many more discussions before we find the appropriate and best working arrangement. If you allow me, just quickly mention some of the measures for immediate and longer-term priorities. Of course, at this stage, especially during the Irish presidency semester, we would like to focus on what is already on the table and what we need to complete. Improve governance under the six-packs. Hopefully, to find the solution for the two-pack, which is already some time overdue. And of course, the rapid work on the single supervisory mechanism. I would say that the same importance must be paid to the conclusions of the multi-annual financial framework, because it's very clear, if we have such high ambitions, we must have a budget to match it. We must be able to show not only what are the plans, but how we are going to finance them. How are we going to invest in the future? How are we going to invest in our regions, in our research, development, in our networks? And I'm glad to say that, and hopefully I'm not too optimistic, that I feel, I sense that there is a positive momentum gathering, and I hope that the European Council will be able to find an agreement at its next meeting. And I hope that the agreement would be good enough for the European Parliament. Because let's be honest, what was on the table in December? That was already a proposal for the multi-annual financial framework, which is already 20 billion below the current multi-annual financial framework. And of course, we have to reflect that we will have one country more, we have more competencies to deal with, and the European Union today is looking completely different than 7 years ago, and it will be totally different union in 2020 than it is today. Therefore, I hope that once the solution is found and deal is made, that it will be the deal which could be acceptable also for the European Parliament, that it will be a good deal for Europe, for European citizens, because it would be a very strong signal about our ability to adopt good solutions and to support our policy with appropriate budgets. If it comes to the medium-term priorities, where we have already seen how important it is to motivate and help member states with the structural reforms, we also envisage the creation of a special instrument, competitiveness and convergence instrument, which should help to improve the overall economic policy coordination through closer dialogue with the member states, the national parliaments, and with the aim to encourage stronger ownership of the reforms which would make them more effective. And we also would like to use this instrument for helping those member states which go through very difficult structural reforms to absorb the economic shocks, which very often are part of a very difficult process, especially in the first stages of the introduction of the structural reforms. Therefore, I would like to see this new quality of relationship to be reflected in contractual agreements between the member states and the EU institutions, which allow us to be much more precise if it comes to the commitments, obligations, and possible monitoring. We see this as one of the instruments how to get the European economy back on a competitive path, how to help the member states to conclude and complete the structural reforms, and we hope this would be one of the measures which would allow us to focus on growth and creation of the new jobs. Except this, we hope that this year the member states and the businesses will have the possibility to finally tap to the new potential of the European Investment Bank. The work on increased capital is completed. The construction, the creation of the project bond is there. Now we need good projects, good communication with the EIB, and I hope that the member states and the businesses will use this new possibility how to get the finances from such an important institution like the European Investment Bank, and how to channel it to the areas where we can generate most of growth and more jobs, especially for young people. And finally, as regards the short-term proposals, European Commission promised, and we are going to deliver, that during the Irish presidency we will also suggest the creation of a single resolution mechanism to deal with the banks in difficulties. We see it as a very important part and one of the pillars of the banking union. Once we would have the single supervisory mechanism, we need also to have a single resolution mechanism. We will come up with a proposal, and we hope to have a good discussion with the Council and the European Parliament on this proposal. Of course, in the medium term, and this is the time between 18 months to 5 years, the blueprint envisages moving all our member states who would participate in the EMU towards the degree of even deeper budgetary integration. Or put it in other way, to more of a sharing of the sovereignty. And this would include closer examinations of the national budgets and closer comparison, how the national budgets are in line with the European commitments, creation of the proper fiscal capacity for the EMU, and the support for the policy changes which would be a result of this deeper economic integration. And as you would conclude, it's quite clear that for some of these policies we would need the treaty change, and therefore this would be the plans which would come up on the table only after the European Parliament's election. The same, I have to say, applies also to the European Redemption Fund, which would help many of our member states to reduce the public debt. This also applies to our proposal to issue the euro bills, because this would also foster the even further integration of European financial markets. These are the measures which would be extremely beneficial for the Eurozone, for the member states, but it's quite clear that for that we need further political discussions, and we need to have the decision to change the treaties. And finally, in the long term, more than 5 years, the European Commission would like to see the EMU move even closer to the full banking union, to the full fiscal union, and to the full economic union. And based on the progressive pooling of sovereignty, it should be possible to create an autonomous euro area fiscal capacity that will help the member states absorb asymmetric shocks. We believe that once we achieve that level of trust, that level of cohesiveness, that level of economic integration, and then we could also proceed with the common issuance of public debt based on that fiscal capacity, which would, of course, enhance the functioning of the markets and the conduct of monetary policy. Now, of course, I know that a lot of these suggestions will not be to the everybody taste. Certainly, at least in some member states, the talk is rather of repatriation of powers and a looser union rather than the deeper integration we believe is necessary. And for the Commission and for the success of the EMU, Euro and the European Union, this is the only viable route to take. But nonetheless, we have to recognize that the gap between what we believe needs to be done and the public reception of the role of the EU is widening rather than narrowing. And that is why it is essential that whatever we do is shown to have complete democratic legitimacy and full accountability to the citizens of Europe. And with this in mind, it's obvious that we cannot talk about the economic and monetary union without mentioning the necessary parallel development of the political union, with reinforced democratic legitimacy and accountability. And to this end, we need to deepen the democratic fabric of our multi-level system. We need to substantially reinforce the role of parliaments at both national and European level. And we have to work on how to improve the EU democratic accountability and legitimacy. Rather than imposing its own point of view, the Commission's aim is to allow for a shared ownership of the debate and the measures to be taken to enhance the democratic dimension of the new EU economic governance architecture. To a very large extent, we are moving in uncharted territory. From one side, we have to respect the treaties, as Vice President of European Parliament mentioned in the morning, but from other side, we are moving into the new areas of cooperation, into the levels of the depth of the integration which we haven't seen before. And therefore, we believe in the shared debate, and the European